welcome to Miss Vicky's Bookcase. I hope you're having a really good day. I can't believe it's October already. Where did the summer go? It's all very autumnal and very cold feeling where I am at the moment. So moving on from the weather, because you've got to fit the weather in somewhere, I thought I'd talk to you today about what I decided to do for my monthly Bujo or book journal for October. Now originally I was going with a really spooky theme. I'd go with spiders and all that kind of stuff, and then I thought I can keep with spooky, but let's do like a shadow thing, which is kind of what I'm doing here. And I was going to do oranges and reds, and then I saw my colour palette in my watercolours and I thought, do you know what? I really feel like having a galaxy of pinks, blues and purples, which is what I ended up going with. Now, I also decided that I'd try and do a bit of Debbie Galore's Castle of Stragoschloss with the background, and it kind of worked and didn't work. And the main reason why it didn't work is because I didn't use watercolour paper. I only used the paper that I actually had. Which is fine, you know, you've got to use what you have instead of just piling everything up. I don't use watercolour paper very often. I mean, I've been doing watercolours now for 2-ish years and I still haven't bought any, so that kind of gives you the idea of how much I actually needed watercolour paper, as I usually just go straight into my bullet journal. Now, the reason why I didn't do that with this is because of the method that I'm using. Well, I say method, I totally changed it in some respects because I didn't have watercolour paper and the paper I did have didn't hold the watercolour very well, rather it didn't hold water very well. And you can kind of see this in how I was doing it. I ended up having to do it in sections, so I had two paintbrushes with me and I was just doing one colour, wetting it, then doing another colour and wetting it. And then when I'd got sufficient quantities of what I wanted, I did actually go over it, as you can see right now, and try and deepen the colour. It was really, really hard to do it this way, but it kind of worked. It worked better than I thought it would, and this paper for the one I'm doing here, that was much better than the watercolour paper I used for a later one. I said watercolour paper, I actually meant just ordinary paper. And if you want to do the wet in wet method and do a galaxy, do use watercolour paper. It's so much easier, and there are so many tutorials on YouTube about doing galaxies, and I had a lot of fun with it once I got over the frustration of I don't have watercolour paper and therefore it's not going to work as well. I did end up being a little bit surprised at how well it kind of worked with the other method of just dabbing with water and then quickly putting the paint on. As you can see in my palette, I did kind of do like 4 different wells of water, and I kind of pigmented the water a little bit, so it made it easier to see what I was painting and kept with the colours. I think looking at it, I think this is the one that I actually had the problems with. It was a different type of paper from the first one I did, and I don't know why. I must have mixed it up with some other paper. That is the worst paper ever to do watercolour type things on it. It is awful. It absorbed all the water that I put down, and immediately it just didn't work well, as you could see when it didn't have that kind of soft fusing together. It was a real struggle with it. Whereas the other paper that I used, I think this is the other one that actually was fine with paper, it wasn't too bad and it mixed well, but didn't have quite what I wanted it to have in the end. And again, that's fine because this is just an experiment into trying something very different. And also, unlike most of the other times where I did one picture per page and then moved on, I did this as batch instead. When I say batch, I meant like I did all the background painting in one go for all the different ones, then I did the next section, then I did the next section, mostly because it's a lot of hard work to get it done and it takes ages to dry. You of course can use a hairdryer, but I decided not to. I just thought I'll just let it dry naturally, and again that worked quite nicely. Well, as you can see, it's a little bit easier to see the mixing of colours a little bit. That worked much better, so you can tell that's the slightly better paper. If you use watercolour paper, I've seen some of the results of just real simple water in water type galaxies, and they're amazing and so little effort. I feel like I'm an advertising person for just watercolour paper today, but it's really true. If you need to do something like this, use the watercolour paper. And if you know you're not going to use it very often like I do, maybe go to your local art shop and see if they sell single pieces of paper, or just buy however much you need from those type of art shops. Makes life a lot easier, and then you don't have this paper floating around and then you're wondering what to use it for. Oh, also, this is one of the ones that I managed to save the video for. I did actually record some other stuff, and when I realised I had a problem, this is one of the ones I actually managed to save, thankfully. So as you can see, I'm wearing totally different clothes. I know you really care. Well, I care a little. And I was doing these little strips because I thought, oh, I'll do these nice little long strips at the top. And as you can see, it kind of works again. And I actually managed to get some nice deep colour. I kind of wish I could have done that a little bit more with the bigger pieces, but it just wasn't working very well because of how big the pieces were, and of course the water absorption, which made it a bit more difficult to get that kind of deep, rich colour that I wanted. So at least I've got those ones. Now, this is the next section, so I decided to, as I said, to go with Galaxy. So this is me doing all the little different stars in the galaxy and realising the paint was still too thick, and then thinking I'll just add some water to it. Now this is just basic gouache, any kind of white paint that's opaque like acrylic. I wouldn't go with oil, just simply because that takes forever to dry again, and you just mix it a little bit with water so it's a little bit liquidy, and then you just use a toothbrush or a paintbrush and just flick it. And it's a very simple and very effective way of just adding a night sky. The only downside is what you'll see later. Well, there we go. So I just thought I'd show you all three together. The only downside later is when I'm doing the black. I did think that I would do the watercolour black, but then I remembered what happened last time, and I was like, oh, I don't want it really patchy. I'll just go over in felt tip, and I went with a Tombow black marker. As you can see, I kind of was messing around a little bit with it, and I just coloured in the black bits so that they were very obvious, and it worked kind of well. Of course, it does have that felt tip line because I don't use markers very often. I really should, because I've got some really fantastic markers, but it kind of gave that really nice pop, and I really liked it. Now, I don't know if you can see it very well, but the downside really is if you're doing the gouache or whatever it is paint and you're flicking it, it kind of goes on the white bit, and as you can see, I did colour it over with the black, but it's kind of a little bit obvious, which is a shame because I thought that went very well. But overall, it doesn't matter. It actually does look better in real life, I'm going to say. So, at least I hope so. So these strips are going to be for the tracking page because I thought that'd be nice to have strips across the top. And I kind of decided that I'd go with kind of one theme across both pages. So I started off with some nice little trees. It was bare because of course it's kind of wintry and cold and dark, and I was kind of going for that kind of theme again. Also, I've realised I'm not very good at drawing trees. I may have to practice. Who knows what I'm going to be doing next year with my bullet journal. Maybe I'll draw lots of trees just to practice. And where was I? Yes, and I just, again, I really like these little strips. They were well worth the effort of holding them down to paint them, and overall I feel like it actually gave a really nice colour. They certainly turned out, I think, better than the larger ones, in fact. And other than the fact, of course, they don't match with the galaxy background, but that's fine. I don't mind a bit of change. It goes with the fact that it kind of cuts a little bit in the middle, but you'll see that in a minute. And here we go. So with the theme, I had a hill in the middle of the way, and I decided that one side, of course, would be the trees, which I've spoken about, and the other side would be the classic city skyline that you see quite often with these. So overall, I'm very pleased, and I really like how they look together. Now, this is the two, oh yeah, that's the one on the left was the one I originally painted, and I was like, well, which one should I go for? I think I went with this one in the end because it actually looked a bit better. Now I'm looking at it in the light of the YouTube, and I'm like, maybe the other one was a little bit better in the end. But never mind, all is done now. And again, I decided that I wanted to do trees and just have those nice tree silhouettes. I really liked having 2 trees on either side. And I thought, what should I do in the middle? It just looks a bit bare in the middle. I should have just kept it as it was. Well, I say I should have kept it as it was, but it wasn't that bad what I decided to do. But I really, really regret it in some respects. But that's okay. I'm going with this month is a Bob Ross month where they're all happy little accidents, and I have learned from it, which again is absolutely fine by me. I'm so glad I've got this bullet journal to record my mistakes as well as the happy, not accidents, but happy uplifting side of it, as well as the slightly bad failures or happy little accidents with Bob Ross. Now, I don't know why I just didn't cut down the black a little bit at the bottom, because I was like, well, I'll colour it in. I'll stick the book of the month in this. I actually changed my mind halfway through as well, what I was going to use this one for. So I didn't waste all that black in the end, but I certainly wish I'd cut it down a little bit. Here we go. Here's my, it looks a bit bare. Let's go with something in the middle. Yeah, I did a copse of trees. Or corpse of trees? Corpse? I'm going to go with corpse of trees. And I did fir trees. I do not like them. I really, really do not like them. And they annoy me every time I look at it. Thankfully, I came up with a slight solution so I don't have to look directly at it. And you'll see that when I stick it in the bullet journal. This one I kept with a city skyline again. There is absolutely nothing scary about the silhouettes that I've done for this at all. As I said, I did want to do a scary one, but in the end I actually went almost, sounds really bad when I say, with a bit of generic trees and skyline, other than the Stregoslosh castle at the very beginning, which I enjoyed doing a quick draw of. But again, this just works very well for what I actually wanted it to do, and I felt like if I was going to do Halloween, I would have to put a bit more of an effort in it. And since I have been away for most of this month, I wasn't going to get a chance to really do anything else. But I'm so pleased with it overall, and that I decided to do this. And by the way, I decided to stick washi tape on this one because no matter what I did, it wouldn't stick. And I also found the Pritt stick. Thanks, Mom, but the boys didn't put it where I thought it was. It was underneath the table. My mom's my biggest fan, right, Mom? I also realised, by the way, that I had actually made the strips too long, so I had to chop off a bit, which was a bit sad, really. But I've still got the bits, and I might just stick them in a place somewhere in the bullet journal a little bit later on in the month. But as you can see, actually, that worked really well with the strip. Again, really pleased. And this is me drawing in my usual squares. Do you know, I just realised I did not even write in the numbers. So, well, at least you spared me writing the numbers in, and you spared me messing around. This is the time where I had real problems with my new setup, and it kept saying it was full even though I cleared it all. But you don't need to hear all about the woes of trying to record for a bullet journal. I will mention one thing though, and that's this section will bounce about a little bit, most because I'm having to take my phone off my new boom arm to fix it, then put it back on again, and it kept moving, so it may just jump just slightly, but that shouldn't affect the overall thing of what I'm doing. Now, of course, I'm putting my usual squares in, and I'm having a lot of Bob Ross's happy accidents with this because I don't know what I was thinking, but I did the first line and then I did the second line and I squished them all up together, and I was like, well, there's so much space. Why did I squish them all together when I have more space? And on the other side, I was like, oh, I'll remember how to do it. I'll do it so with nicely spaced. It will look a little bit odd, but it doesn't really matter, as this is supposed to be a working journal, and it's funny. Every time I'm going to look at it now, I'll be like, that's because I wasn't paying attention. And I find that quite often I don't pay attention to what I'm doing because my mind is so distracted with thinking, racing ahead, that I don't pay attention to the present, which I wouldn't say it's a failing, but sometimes I really wish I'd kept my mind on the prize and not racing far ahead. Here we go. So as you can see, this time I was like, I'll remember how to do it. Look, I've done it all nicely spaced out. Fantastic. And then as you can see, I accidentally drew one right up. And then I was like, oh, whoops. And it doesn't happen just once. You'll see it again in a second. On the same row even. I did it again. It doesn't matter. Maybe I was trying to unconsciously draw a smiling face with my squares. I'm not sure what happened there really, but at least I've got it done. That is the main thing, and this is what I like to think of when I'm looking at some of this, is at least I'm making the effort and getting it done, because it can be really difficult to keep up with something like this. It's incredibly hard, and sometimes really hard to think about what theme you're going to have, and you have to plan it in advance. And I'm so glad that I've managed to keep up with it and try and get it out around the right kind of time of month. And I'm very glad that I have the bullet journal to be able to have this creativity and force me to work into, or rather with, a schedule rather than just being haphazard. Now, going back to the picture a little bit, as you can see, I decided to chop the trees in half, which means I can't actually see how bad they are if they're together. I can only see them at the side, which again makes life a lot easier for me because I just can't see it. And actually looks better when they're apart. It doesn't look that bad, as if I've got something in the middle, which is fantastic. Now, I also decided, you can't see it very well at all here, but I decided to use a silver pen for the lettering this month. It works fine in real life, but when it's on camera, it just doesn't work so well. Other than on here, this last little one here, that's where it works fine. Everywhere else, and maybe the one that I'm just about to write here, but everywhere else it goes a bit wrong. So we're now done with the bullet journal, and we're doing the normal flip through so you can see it all in one go. So as usual, we have the title page, then we have the tracker page, so books on the left, audiobooks on the right. Then we have our TBR page on the left and read on the right. And of course, last but not least, is the book of the month. And there we have it. So hopefully you've enjoyed it and it inspires you to do your own little galaxy. I hope you have fun if you want to try it, and do use watercolour paper if you're going to do it with watercolours, is my advice. I will see you hopefully in the next video. Bye!